afternoon, Chief Justice.
Are you well?
I'm fine, thank you, Chief Justice.
Are you relaxed?
Relatively.
A little bit?
Relatively.
Or relatively. Okay. For how many years have you practiced law?
Chief Justice, I started my articles in 1977, and I've been in law ever since. It's about 40 years.
And how many for how many months have you acted as a judge?
In the High Court in the Western Cape, I've acted unbroken since October last year. So it would be 4 terms going into next term. And I also acted in 2005 in the Eastern Cape for 1 term.
How long does it ordinarily take you to deliver a reserve judgment?
Chief Justice, I've looked at my judgments in the last year. I've not delivered a single judgment longer than 2 months after the matter was heard.
Both civil and criminal trials?
Both, Chief Justice.
Thank you. JP?
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Mr. Parker.
Good afternoon, Chief Justice.
Right. I'm going to disclose up front that I know you. We've known each other for a while, and we have a cordial relationship. And last term, we shared the floor, and we used to have coffee together.
Indeed,
so for
sir.
what it is worth, I must disclose that. Mr. Parker, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Let me put it to you, there is racism on the bench, there is racism in the profession, and there is racism in South Africa. And obviously it varies from province to province. Were you to be recommended for appointment to the bench, how can you assist as a permanent judge, assist the leadership of the judiciary to eradicate racism, and particularly in the context of skewed briefing patterns?
Chief Justice, JP, thank you. I firstly recognize the fact that racism is still very much a plague, and on all the levels that you just mentioned. If I were to be recommended and become a judge, I will, wherever I identify racism being practiced, I will definitely confront it. I will deal with it. And if I cannot deal with it effectively on my own, I will certainly bring it to the attention of management. With regard to skewed briefing patterns, I think we can only make a concerted effort to identify more people who were previously disadvantaged and who were not briefed, who didn't enjoy a fair slice of the cake, that they be brought into the system.
Whilst we're talking about skewed briefing patterns, isn't that a form of racism in the first place?
Indeed, so I recognize and I agree that it is so.
Right. Mr. Parker, you've acted for a reasonably long time, both in the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. Do you believe pre-trials inter alia are an effective tool of case flow management? Because I'm asking you because more and more, we're expected to do more and more with less and less resources.
In fact, I am of the view that pre-trials are essential. It's one way, effective way of addressing the court roles to manage cases and to effectively reduce the case flow. I'm only exposed to what happens in the Western Cape, and I've seen it working extremely well there, where a judge is seized with a file and sees it through to the point that it becomes trial ready. And I've been a practitioner for all my life, or most of my life, and I know for practitioners it's easy to manipulate the system. I don't confess that I've ever manipulated the system, but I know it's easy to do so, and I recognize the fact that in some instances practitioners run the trial and directly or indirectly affect how the trial drags itself out. But with effective pre-trials and trial management, I think the judicial officer is in control of that process.
Right. By looking at your CV, one gets the impression that you are strong in the context of criminal law. Would you say is that correct, number one? And number two, would you say your expertise is confined to criminal law, or does it extend to
JP
other areas of the law?
Thank you. JP, it's stronger, I would say. I did practice criminal law for the early part of my career, about 20-odd years. Thereafter, I diversified and I did less and less criminal work. I have done a fair amount of labor work, a fair amount, not nearly enough, constitutional work and administrative law. My practice was unfortunately not the type that attracted much of that kind of work. I must also say in the last year that I've been at the High Court, I've been exposed to literally all sorts of different types of legal matters. And to the extent that I wasn't on top of things, I've quickly had to go and refresh my memory and learn. So I think I am fairly covered. In my 38-odd years of active practice, I think I've come across most areas and aspects of the law, either as a practitioner or an instructing attorney, or appearing in the High Court myself, since the attorneys were allowed to appear, and also since I've been sitting on the bench. So I think I've come across most aspects. There obviously will be aspects that I haven't dealt with, but I don't think my expertise is slanted too heavily on criminal work. In the Western Cape, in the last year since I've been there, I've done 3 criminal trials. For the rest, I've been in the civil pool. And at the expense of sounding self-centered, I didn't experience insurmountable problems, JP.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Judge President. Ms. Stewart?
Thank you, Chief Justice. Hello, Mr. Parker.
Thank you, ma'am.
The comments from the General Bar Council have at paragraph 15, a comment on your temperament, which I think it's fair to ask you to comment on. They say the candidate's judgments can be somewhat intemperate, and then they go on to quote S versus Ngwenya, and they quote you saying, the cherry on the cake, as it were, was his absolutely unbelievable evidence, and that the accused would take the trouble of listening to his own version, he would be struck by the inherent improbabilities therein. What is your comment on the Bar Council's comment on your temperament?
Thank you, ma'am. I've noted that comment, and if I must be brutally frank, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe I could have used better words or other words which were not as strong as those. I remember the matter very clearly. It was indeed a very brutal murder where the deceased lady was treated very, very badly. And the accused had a very flippant attitude, even when they got into the witness box. But if I must be brutally frank, and as I say, with the benefit of hindsight, it's probably a fair comment that I could have used better terminology to express the same word. But legal language is such that it is often loaded. And the circumstances of a particular case, I think, often determine how one expresses oneself.
Thanks, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Advocate Nkosi Thomas?
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
The GCB, if I may take you to the same, the feedback received by this commission from the GCB, they had the following to say at paragraph 4.8 about your experience. I just want to test if you would agree with what they say there. They say there at 4.8, in the circumstances, the candidate's knowledge of the law, while substantially focused on criminal law, is more varied than that. Is that fair?
That's what I was trying to explain when Chief JP asked me the question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nkosi Thomas. President Mai?
Thank
Thank you, Chief Justice. One of the judgments to which you refer in your questionnaire is the matter of the Department of Correctional Services against Pop Crew. Are you with me?
I'm listening, yeah.
All right.
Thanks. Sorry, I couldn't see you earlier, that's why I didn't acknowledge it.
Okay. You have commented here that despite the SCA's ruling in favor of the relevant correctional officers, they are still battling today, 4 years after judgment was delivered, to get their justice. And I take special interest in this matter because I delivered the judgment, and the minister of the relevant department is here to hear what you have to say. What is going on?
Ma'am, if I understand your question to mean what is happening today,
Yes, I just want to understand if the court order has not been complied with 4 years after,
I
the fact.
regret to say that it has not fully been given effect to. We've been through various stages. We've had to, as you would know, go up to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Supreme Court of Appeal then gave their judgment. We had to prepare further papers to threaten the department to reinstate them. There was a reluctance to reinstate them. They were then reinstated. Then the next battle was to get the department to pay them their back pay. We again had to prepare fresh papers, and on the doorstep of the court they came and with a settlement and paid, I'd say, 85% of what is due to them. The dilemma for the litigants is now whether they should continue with this battle for the other 15% and put their lives on hold. But what the department has done is it has paid them that 85 or 90% of what is due to them, but it refuses to promote them. So those unfortunate correctional officers are still locked in battle.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, Minister.
If I'm allowed, I will make sure personally that I follow up the details of this matter.
I'd appreciate it.
Sure that,
I feel very
the
strongly
necessary
about that
relief
matter
is,
and those particular litigants.
Afforded. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Commissioner Schmidt?
Thank you, Chief Justice. Shortly, or in short rather, I see that you've been a member of the ANC for 8 years.
That was right in the beginning,
Being?
when the ANC was unbanned.
So 94 to about 2002.
That would roughly be correct.
Thank you, thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt. You are excused, sir.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice.